Have you ever thought in your life that maybe God was not heavily involved, or maybe he was busy and had forgotten about you? I remember having that feeling several years ago. We had built a house that we thought was going to be our final home. We really liked it. But it was sort of out in a rural area, and we really liked the country. But all of a sudden, all the farmers started selling their land, and they started putting all these developments in. And we were not happy, so we said we're going to have to move. And we moved to another area where we were able to buy quite a bit of acreage so that that could never happen. But we put the other house on the market because obviously we didn't want to be paying two mortgages. And it was at a time when houses were moving quite well. It was not going to be a big problem, we didn't think. But every time somebody would put a bid on the house, something would fall through in the end. And this went on for a long time. And at the same time, my best friend, who's a real estate mogul, was trying to find a perfect investment property for me. He said, it's got to be perfect because I don't want you to be worried about doing anything. And this house stayed on the market for 5 years. 5 whole years. Every time we thought we had a deal. And I was saying, Lord, I try to be faithful. You know, I pay my tithe. I do all the stuff I'm supposed to do. Why are you making me pay 2 mortgages? You know, I said, this just doesn't seem right to me. And then at the same time, after 5 years, another friend of mine who knew a lot about real estate told me about the 1031 exchange, where if you sell a property and you have an excess profit, if you can roll it over into a more expensive property, you don't have to pay the taxes on it. But it all has to be done within a 45-day period. You sell a property, find a new property, do it all within a 45-day period. Well, interestingly enough, after 5 years, I found out about the 1031. My friend who had been looking for the perfect property for years found the property and the house sold for twice as much as it had been on the market for before. So it was actually the Lord blessing me, and I didn't realize it. And you see, that happens so often in our lives. We blame God because things aren't going exactly the way that we expect them to go, when in fact, he has a much bigger blessing in store for us than we actually think about. Well, you know, I go back and I think about my life, and one of the wonderful things that happened with me as a youngster is my mother was disturbed by the fact that I was such a poor student, and she made me read. And I didn't like the reading, but you had to do it anyway. And she didn't dictate what we had to read. And one of the stories that I read that really had a big impression on me, my favorite story in the Bible, Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers. Now think how traumatic that must be. But he didn't say, bummer, my own brothers sold me into slavery. Instead, he said, if I'm going to be a slave, I'll be the best slave there is. And he ended up being appointed overseer of Potiphar's household, the captain of the Egyptian guard. A very responsible position. And then Potiphar's wife sees him, and she says, ooh, this is a good-looking dude. I want to deal with him. But no, he has values. He has morals and values, and he rebuffs her advances, and she tells a lie on him, and he winds up being thrown into prison. Now, obviously, Potiphar didn't believe his wife, because if he did, he would have had him executed. But, you know, had to save face for it. He ends up in prison. He doesn't say, bummer. Here I am living up to all the values and principles I've ever been taught, and my reward is being thrown into prison. No, he says, if I'm going to be a prisoner, I'll be the best prisoner there is. The next thing you know, he has a very responsible position in the prison, begins interpreting dreams, and ends up as governor of Egypt, which was the most powerful nation in the world at that time. And what did that story say to me as a youngster? It said, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. If you believe in God, you trust in God, he can take any circumstance and make it into something positive. And that was truly wonderful for me at that time because, you know, we lived in dire poverty, always wondering, you know, where the next dollar was going to come from. Although I got to tell you, my mother was a masterful manager of money. You know, she would go to the store and the Goodwill and buy a pair of jeans with a big hole in the knee, back before that was fashionable, and buy 2 patches and put it on the knee, and people would be saying, "Where'd you get that from? I want it." And she would go to Goodwill, she would go to Farmers and on Sunday morning, and she would say, "Can we pick 4 bushels of your apples or your beans or your corn, 3 for you and 1 for us?" They always liked that deal. And then she'd bring the stuff home and can it and could just stretch $1 so far. And she knew the value of money. And in fact, I am certain that if my mother were the Secretary of the Treasury, we would not be in a deficit situation. But yeah, she knew what to do. But